It all starts with a vision, the foresight to see the possibilities ahead, and the brilliant ingenuity to bring it to life, and the skill to make the impossible possible. It is understanding your role and using it to shape the way forward. It is to recognize the freedom of creativity. It's having the ability to be bold, yet stay relevant through the years by creating forms that are meaningful and lasting. Built to beautify your life, built for you to thrive. It is this spirit of perfection and wanting better that fuels our purpose at Nations Trust Bank. A philosophy that drives us to be more than a bank and recognize our ability to shape life's present and future by building relationships that endure. Shaped the right way, shaped for better. Nations Trust Bank. Trust in better.
Rangika, very good evening to you. Thank you for being here with us. It is indeed a special day. WNPS PLANT, Sriyan, this is Vijayaratna. An initiative that began to cover to aim to cover 1,000 acres in a decade, now protects and is a refuge to over 1,000 species, of which 100 are critically endangered, in an area of 2,000 acres in just 3 years. 1,000 acres in 10, achieved 2,000 in 3. Phenomenal. A vision that was tracked. A vision that was fast-tracked into reality, driven by boundless passion and energy. WNPS PLANT, its conceptualizer, visionary Sriyan, deploys his leadership and commercial skills that he has accumulated in a career spanning 3 decades and more in private and sector entities, has now turned into a brilliant conservation administrator. Sriyan's brilliant academic and all-round track record at St. Peter's, yes, St. Peter's, Josephine's, please note, continued as he breezed to the University of Sri Lanka with a first-class degree in business management, just starting a brilliant academic career, after which many more academic achievements with similar stellar outcomes followed. Sriyan's corporate career followed a similar trajectory, where he had been at the helm of leading organizations in positions of managing director, CEO. He is now a business consultant, board director, speaker, both locally and internationally, author, photographer, and also an accomplished musician. Sriyan was involved with different chambers and in local and global charities, and has served on several boards, including Youth Business International in the UK. Sriyan is currently the chairman of PLANT, Preserving Land and Nature Guarantee Limited, currently vice president, advisor, mentor to all of us, a recent past president of the WNPS. During his tenure, supported by a passionate team, they engineered a massive transformation and renaissance of the WNPS, culminating in lectures like this tonight. The key conceptualizer of PLANT, Emerald Trails, and the notion of a Sri Lanka Leopard Day, is also editor of our Loris Journal and past chair of the Wildcats subcommittee. Sriyan, over to you.
Thank you, Graham. I'm honored, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully that's the most boring part of today that we have finished. But I'm really honored to see a number of friends and passionate conservationists in the room. What I'm going to be talking about really is essentially almost an orchestra or a harmony, because you're hearing one voice, but there are a number of people behind the scenes who are all singing in perfect harmony for this plant story. So we're going to talk about WNPS and our efforts to change, hopefully, some of the direction and the way we work. Let's get started. But let me start with, what's this task and whose role is this, right? I know you can't see it, but in one quarter of that wheel, WNPS embarked on a lot of ecosystem conservation in the recent years, right? And then, I just drew from, if you look at Judge Veeramantri's book, talks a lot about the power and the commonality all religions have with nature. Not because Sunila is in the room, but if you read Ravana, you'll find Adivasi Rakshas that she talks about, people who actually protected the land, not the politicians, not the boundaries, the land as you know it. So whose job is it? It is the individuals, people of this country. And I'm going to bring that theme back as we talk about it. Some random things I just want to throw out in terms of private conservation, because if you look at the world, UK, you have lots of associations who are in the top 5 landowners. US, you have massive landowners who dedicate much of the land towards private conservation. We don't see that trend in Sri Lanka, and this is what we are trying to shift. Of course, you have the big agencies like Nature Conservancy and, these people, 125 million acres. And interestingly, WNPS, more than 50 years ago, we had it in our object saying, set up private conservation areas and all of that. But this journey didn't actually start like that. So what were the starting points of this song, the first 3 notes, so to speak? Really, it began with this gentleman. I know you can't see him too well, but this, who's a food scientist. When I was president of WNPS, one day we got this cryptic note. And, I went out to meet him in his property in Moratua, about 40, 50 perched land, about 2/3 build up. But he was talking about, there should be so many species in this land and they're not there anymore. And if I were to leave a land like this, could you guys kind of conserve it? And he was just, sharing some thoughts. So I came back and we were spending time wondering what to do about this. And it was that thought process which resulted in getting out a concept note saying, what if we start something where we are actually trying to protect land privately? So that was step 2. Then Murtaza Yusuf Ali, I'm not sure whether he's in the room, but he was very supportive and said, okay, let me organize a forum. Jehan, myself, Spencer, a couple of us went, and there was a top corporate gathering at his home, and he hosted a number of people, and we passionately spoke about plant and what we wanted to do. They listened, they appreciated, had a couple of comments and words of advice, and we could get no further. And so for the next few weeks, months, this was very frustrating because we couldn't get the momentum that we were hoping for. We were very passionate and we felt this was the most brilliant thing we'd come up with. We just were not moving. And on one such, one of many nights of overnight worry and frustration was one of these early morning unlocks, which resulted in a concept note going out a few hours later to the team saying, what if we focus our work on endemics in the southwest part and start narrowing it to build forest corridors? So that was where emerald trails and plant came together, the concepts to become what you know of plant today. So I'm not going to talk too much about this part. You can look it up in the website, but we are really only 4 years old, set up to want to privately conserve, right? And we have a mission, it's out there, but interestingly, a little bit on a logo, because we picked the buhora leaf. This was inspired also by our first plant property, and I'm going to talk about that, but when we first visited it, you get these trees towering above the rest. And that was one of the reasons to kind of look at this very rare plant species and pick it into our logo, right? But what do we do? So 3 things. One is look at conserving existing lands, protecting existing important sensitive lands. Second part, the more important part, if you were to put it that way, is encourage and work with private individuals, private sector, organized or informal, to convert privately held land or parts of it into conservation spaces. The third part is, of course, restoration, planting, and things like that. But very clearly, we are not a tree planting organization. That is not what we are. We are a conservation entity. This whole drive by WNPS is aimed at conserving. And you will understand that as we go more into the story. When we started looking at this, we realized that, we are a hotspot. 85-90% of all the endemics, the red and blue spots, are all in the southwest corner of Sri Lanka. Right? So if we are trying to play and we want to protect endemism, this is where we will have to play. So we set our sights very clearly saying, this is the playground that we want to work in. Now, I spoke of the emerald trails, and this is what we talk about when we do our presentation. So we sketched out, with some help from Sampath and his team, we sketched out some corridors, and we said we want to connect up the already protected larger spaces so that range-restricted endemics and other species can have broader movement, right? Now, WNPS has been around for 130 years, and wish them all the best for the 200th now itself, because I know this organization will continue. So we could have the ability to think on a 20, 30, 50-year time horizon. And we said, okay, you heard Graham, we had, wanted to get about 1,000 acres, and that kind of got ticked off too fast, so we had to up the game. But we are still passionate on maybe trying to get 100 kilometers of forest corridor built, 100 kilometers, a lot of work, right? I'll tell you where we are now. But look at these two maps done by a number of the academics and department and all of that. On the left, the blue, greens, those are all the other state forests, the protected areas. You can see all of that is sitting on a certain parts of the country. The map which has the red, the greens are the other state forests, but the reds are where all the endemic species are. So the notion is very clear here. If you want the endemics in Sri Lanka to live, the efficiency or relative efficiency or anything you may call it of the Department of Wildlife and Forest and the government will not matter too much. Because all of this land is in the heart of development and in the heart of private sector. So individuals, the private sector, all need to come in, and I will use these words loosely, but essentially the non-government part of Sri Lanka will have to come to the party if we are to give them a future. Now, we have failed in some things, we will fail, but the worry or this threat is something that we said we are going to take on. When we looked at, and some of this wording may be small, but you had a lot of wonderful examples of conservation in Sri Lanka. Mahausakhanda, Dunvila, we had the Row project, Belipola. There was a whole range of places in Knuckles, elsewhere, where individuals, entities had done amazing work in rewilding, reforesting locations. Phenomenal stuff. Now, our problem was that no one had done anything on scale. And while we had wonderful individual examples, there was nothing to lead us to say, how do we scale? How do we make something nationally relevant? And so we knew we are going to fail. But we decided to start anyway. So the first 1, maybe 2 years was very inspiring. I think the first 2 years was very inspiring, because I had a whole bucket of things that people in almost every conversation, some of these came up. Yeah, yes, that's a great idea, but will government let you do it? Are you guys trying to push WNPS too fast? Where will the funding come from? What's your business model? People have tried it and failed. Why should people invest in other people's properties? All kinds of narratives would come in very encouraging, very inspiring, and this became some of the reasons that we had to make this work. If anything, they were pushing us higher and higher, saying, you'd better figure this out fast. I don't think we figured this out yet. We are learning, we are here to share a journey, and we want to learn from people as well. So I want to kind of take a walk on the wild side. People have been talking about, what's going to happen when you start taking the forests out, the invasives, and then now we create our own destruction. A huge portion of that part of the country is under agricultural land. Big problems. But I want you to take 3 minutes and walk with me on the wild side. I want to show you a little bit of why we do what we do, and then we will start talking about some of the learnings and other journeys that we've had. So I'm going to play you a short video of 3 minutes. I hope you like this. So all of that is on our properties, and that's a big responsibility. I want to thank all the photographers whose photographs are in our survey reports and the camera traps and all of that. We use a lot of them to tell this story. But what is plant at the end of the day? Is it a scientific initiative? Is it a management strategy, an art form? It's very difficult to answer that. It's a bit of an abstract concept saying we'd like to do something like this. It's an aggregate of disciplines. We want to bring scientists, marketeers, analysts, young people, field people, everyone into a move. It's a platform that we want people to be able to leverage, people who want to do research, people who want to invest money in serious conservation initiatives, corporates who want to do planting and other things which will make a difference rather than count the numbers of trees. All of that, right? It's community-based, decentralized, but more than everything, this is what we want is to make it a catalyst for a social change. We want to shift something in the way Sri Lanka works. So how do we look at land? One of the first things was Rainforest Trust. Zainab connected us up with Quick Response for Nature, with Sanjeev and the teams, and Steve from US. They were the first believers who said, yeah, we like what you guys are trying to do. And they funded us with 25 million to buy our first property. And that gave us one big step of confidence saying, maybe we are doing something right. We also work with, so we own several blocks of land at the moment. In addition, we work with individual smaller land blocks, and Udena and Kaletis, when we announced this, he was the first one who said, I'm willing to commit my property to plant. And that was where we got the inspiration for the big Buhora trees when we went to Dinyaya. All right. So we work with a number of smaller blocks. Sanjay is walking in, and we've been putting a forest corridor around his property as well. And that's Murtaza, whom I referred to earlier. Welcome, Murtaza. So these are people who are hugely supportive of our work. The third big step really was when we unveiled our partnership with Haley's. Johan Rodrigo and the team from Horner Plantations have been phenomenal. And from day dot, they were right. We are going for this. How can we support you guys? And when Roshan was brought into the picture, said, yeah, I'm bringing all 3 plantations into this, and we are going to give you guys 2,500 acres. We want to be part of this. We'll think big. So today with the Talawakale team and the Horner team, we're doing some amazing work, and we'll talk about that as we go along, and we have to find time to get down to Kalani Valley as well, and lots of interesting stuff. We can only think of that kind of landscape when we work with the plantations. So this was another big, big step. We've dabbled a bit with urban work, not much. We did some work with the municipality in Colombo and all of that, but really right now we have our hands full. So how do we operate? A very small team. We have 3 full-timers. So that's the 3 youngsters who are sitting here. And these kids will get on a bus at any time of the day. They'll be going to Muskelia, figuring out how they get from there to their estates. Day, night time, they will walk extreme lengths to geotag our boundaries. An amazingly passionate team of 3 young people, right? And then, yours truly, I spent quite a bit of my time on this. We have a bunch of about 20 plus volunteers for the extended plant team, and led by Inoka, Sampath, 2 professors who give us phenomenal support, and a number of others. We're missing people like Zainab and other people who couldn't be with us today, but we've had a lot of energy coming in from this volunteer group. Rangika and the WNPS team, Graham, Spencer, Sevandi, I want to stop using names. Phenomenal support, right? So they come to the party. We have regional resources that we hire to kind of look after some of the properties we own. And we always use community resources for any planting and work that we do in the areas, right? So we do the monitoring. There's a lot of reporting and very transparent engagement with our donors. We are very happy to tell them what's going on at any given time. And there's a lot of orchestration of these campaigns and fundraising as well, right? So a lot goes into this. But as you heard, my background is a lot more from corporate, so I'm interested in numbers. At any given time, for me, it's about, okay, what impact are we making? What are we measuring? And so we've been very clear from the start saying we want to measure. But these 2 worlds are colliding with science. They would like to try something, experience it, see how the results are, and progress that conversation. And that might take 5-10 years. With corporates, we have annual budget, maybe at best a 3-year corporate plan, and they'd want results like this. So we have a problem. Unless we start talking the language that the businesses want, they will not put the money where the mouth is. So we had to find a middle path to bridge this. So I want to share a little bit of what we measure and where we stand on some of that. You heard the species. 1,159 species as of in December. And mind you, I'll talk about the biodiversity assessments in a little while. Right now, we are working on over 20 kilometers of forest. Right? We haven't finished it. Obviously, we are very early into that stage, but active engagement building 20 kilometers of forest. 28 locations. We have over 2,500 acres committed now. That's a big asking rate for us to step up to. Already we've created about 360 acres of new forest. We are not in the tree counting business. Please understand, we are not excited to reach 100,000 trees. That means nothing unless the trees are making a difference to the ecosystems. So we are a lot more about ecosystems, but we've clocked over 26,000 trees. We've done biodiversity assessments in 10 of our locations. We've been begging and talking and engaging donors. We've raised over 100 million rupees so far, and we have 30 plus partners who engage. So these are some of the numbers along our journey. Let's look at the species. That's what gets everyone, energized, right? So we have 540 fauna and 600 plus of flora in the mix. What is very exciting is the 125 critically endangered. So when you know that the work you're doing, and some of these species are very, very range restricted, so you might be having half of the land that they live in. This is a big challenge for us, right? But this is the very reason why we embarked on this journey, because there's no other voices. I know you can't read, and the idea wasn't to kind of get you to kind of be able to go through this, but on the endangered, critically endangered list, our pouch tombbat was so important that DWC featured Professor Sampath and his team's article on that in their cover. Right, so you have bats there, you have geckos, you have frogs, you have lizards, dragonflies, all hanging on the brink of extinction. We have 3 species there, Agrodaneo, then the corrugated frog, and Salmonella day gecko, and 17 others who are coming in locations which were never before encountered, and some of them are remarkable locations. So we are adding a lot of new knowledge to science, right? And the list goes on with the endangered, 98 from fish to birds to snakes, butterflies, fauna. Exciting list. We are also a bit secretive about this. This is the first time this has even been put even in small font, because in Sri Lanka this can sometimes become a problem when people know where the locations are. So we are being public this time about the species, but very secretive usually about our locations. But we run stories like this on Instagram and things like that when we want people to understand about the species and what we have. So please look us up. I won't take your time on these things. But we also, work, this is with the Peradeniya Gardens, Peradeniya Botanical Gardens, and Sumit Ekanayaka and his team bringing back some species to life. Right? They've been protecting these species, and about 10 months ago, we planted 10 in one location of ours, which was matching the kind of terrain they needed, and 10 species, 10 plants in the second. And both the plants on the left and the right are from the 2 locations, and I took them about 3 weeks ago. So 10 months later, the plants are hanging on, and we are very excited. Hopefully, we are bringing things back to life. And this is more of the work that we want to do as we go along, bring species back to life and give hope, right? If you're wondering where we are operating at, you can go onto our website. These are the kind of coverages, and we have small stories on some of our locations, the bigger ones, which tell you with a bit of species and details and images about what the locations are and what we do there and things like that. So very exciting when we work, but there are pluses and minuses in how we go about it. We are not seeking perfection. So we could be faulted a lot for this. This is also the reason we can scale, because we are not trying to recreate that perfect ecosystem. We are working in very disturbed habitats. We are working in areas which are very close to human habitat. We are working in destroyed habitats. We are trying to recreate some form of ecosystem to give species a fighting chance. The idea is not to get it perfect. The idea is to get something going. And somebody might say, yeah, but you need that species, you need to do this. Yes, we'll try to learn, we'll try to absorb, we'll try to accommodate, provided the thought process can scale. Because it's very different when you're managing one property and engage deeply to managing from 0 to 28 locations in 3.5 years and counting. And these are growing by the one, right? Then we have invasive species. It's not sexy to fund invasives. So MAS funds one of our initiatives in Minuangalla, but everybody is about tree planting. It's not as fun if you say, I gave my money to remove invasives in an acre or two. How many trees are now growing? Nobody can answer that. But invasive removal has a far better chance, I would argue, in some cases of creating or recreating an ecosystem than new plants. So these are some of the fun and games that we have as we go along. What's the story on plants? So, as you know, there are many techniques, assisted natural regeneration and analog forestry, relay floristics, you name it. We are not religious about what we use. We'd like to use whatever techniques which can help us move the needle, and we want to move it fast. We've so far deployed about 165 species of plants, right? 12 nurseries that we've leveraged. 50% of them are privately owned, 50% are from the state, right? We are currently having about a 15% loss rate, but I would say that's probably not accurate. That's going to get worse because we are at early stages of planting in some cases, and I think once you get to the 12-15 month mark, that range will grow up. So we modeled and planned with about a 25%, but what we've had to do is that we'd had to adopt and adjust to using taller trees. Because we found that smaller trees, obviously, especially in montane areas, are taking much longer to grow, as well as they get caught up with all the undergrowth and things like that. And then we had some challenges from both the natural predators as well as from people. So we're trying to take slightly taller trees, and we had to use protective encasements in this effort. So it costs us more, but it keeps our loss rate lower. But the biggest challenge is in this species. With just 10 species, we are accounting for a huge proportion of the plants that we adopt. And this is a challenge, right? On one side, we are using 165 species. On the other side, more than 2/3 are in 10 species. So as much as we would like the shade bringing plants and the early adopting plants and all the science to come in theory, yes. In practice, when you hear that somebody is doing 1 million tree plantings, I can tell you, nobody can give you 1 million plants. Nobody can give you 100,000 plants. I can't get 10,000 plants in the right combinations. So plants have become the biggest limiting factor because nobody has tried this in scale. They will tell you, we'll give you kumbuk, we'll give you me. Monologue is not the answer. You need the combinations. So right now, this has become one of our biggest challenges because we've been accelerating faster than the planting capacity can absorb, right? What do we mean when we say we are creating corridors? So I just put up 3 of these are maps. This is how we go about it. So we have dialogue with the estates and say, shall we create something like this? And then we get some alignment, and then our team, together with the estate team, will go along, let's say the waterways that we are mapping, and geotag the different locations of the entire stretch. And once we have that, we'll get a sign off from the leadership of the estate, and then we have alignment on what we will reforest. Then it's our job to package that into projects, which we do, and then we approach different corporate donors saying, please give us this amount of money to reforest this segment of this longer stretch. So right now, the Then we get into these kind of planting exercises, long stretches. These are not massively wide stretches. In some cases, they are narrow. In some cases, if there is more space, we will take in that space. In some cases, I must confess that the plantations have been very supportive, where we've said, hey, you need to take off a few lines of tea in the process. They've said, yes, they'll do that. So my gratitude to them for that kind of proactive engagement with us and the vision to actually recreate the forest corridors that the waterways deserve. So the two of the longest corridors that we're working on at the moment, Muskelia, where the Muskelia 5 estates, 9 kilometers, it's all funded by largely people sitting in the room actually. And then Talawakale, we've started mapping 13 kilometers. We've started work on 2 of the estates, and we need to be able to raise more funds to kind of continue that work, right? In terms of forest enrichments, also, we try to work on existing forests and see what we can do to kind of take off large trees. That middle tree, if you can see that bark that's burnt, we try to heat it up with some of those burners, that red burner that you see in the bottom, and heat the bark and gently kill the tree and start bringing some of those invasives down. And sometimes we take out large trees like that mahogany that you can see. So we do different kinds of interventions. You can't see much, but on the far left, at the bottom, there's a bit of a 1.5 foot yellow stick planted. We map out 10 by 10 patches in different forests to try to do some data gathering on the growth rates and things like that. So we do a mix of things, largely using community people like these young folk kids that you see in the middle, post A level, ripe for, doing their own thing. We've tried to get them involved in conservation. So it's always a community-led conversation. Now, what happens in the smaller blocks, right? People have 10, 15, 25, 50 acre blocks, right? I've featured a few pictures here from J.R. Javadana's estate. Pradeep is here, and he was very instrumental in bringing us in. We built a 2.8 kilometer forest corridor around that rubber coconut kind of location. And so these are some of the ways in which we'll work with existing plantations on smaller blocks. We also call in volunteers and do what we call forest raids, where we go into existing forest patches of ours to take out surplus plants and pot them and reuse them. So in a couple of hours of work, we could get anything from 500 to 1,000 plants through an exercise like that. So we do these kind of things with the smaller locations. But essentially, we have to go back to nursery because we are stuck without enough plants. We know there is a future business model, and we are trying to convince a couple of people to kind of fund the creation of some nurseries. We know seed banks need to be developed, and these are the challenges and the activities that we'll have to do ahead. Now, foraging and plant raids we can do in our properties, but we can't really unleash people into protected areas. But that's an interesting problem. If you're not going to bring the surplus plants from where they exist, how are you really going to help recreate these plants? So we need to figure out answers as we go along with the Forest Department, Department of Wildlife. So our initiative needed storytelling, we needed PR, we needed people to understand what we're trying to do to come and partner us. But the partners we wanted and we started working with, I must confess, were not the partners who are hungry for headlines. There are lots of greenwashing stories in Sri Lanka, and don't even get me going on them. There are lots of digital forests, and I can point you to a few if you want, right? So we were working with partners who wanted to work on serious longer-term conservation, but we also had to be telling our story. We were very glad when the Wharton Business School approached us and said, we'd like to help you, and we said, please help us build a great website so that we can tell our story. And we started also leveraging the great digital assets that Spencer and the WNPS team have built up. We also wanted help from influencers who can act as people that other people would listen to. So we started telling stories in Instagram and on the right, some of the online stories that we have. And we've been trying to build awareness for the last few years in parallel, right? So one of the things I'm proudest about is this slide, because these are the people on whose wings we are riding. Some of them have funded us for land acquisition, including individuals. Some of them are funding us for plant work, the restoration, the forest corridor creation. The others are bringing their competencies, like media, like advice on plants or plants. Some have nurseries. So we have a whole range of partners. Sarvodaya was one of our earliest partners, Trafi, Otafund, these are international partners along with Rainforest Trust and Quick Response for Nature. We have multinationals like Deutsche and the best of local companies and the land partners. So we are hugely indebted to these partners because they've made us what we are and they've helped us fly. So I thank them very, very sincerely. But this was another big step. We've been talking about this to a number of people because in Sri Lanka, our religions have been the beneficiary of lots of lands. But isn't it time that the species and the future generations were the beneficiaries of some of these land donations? So we've been talking to various people saying, why don't you seriously consider giving us some of your lands, writing it in your will, or giving us, because you have a lot of people who have surplus land. They say, I have a property here, I haven't gone there for years. Next thing you know, there's encroachment, right? People have lands. Why not think about the future? And we were inspired when, I'm not sure if Chanaka's in the room, he was trying to see if he could make it. But with Dilshan's intervention, we had a 20-acre landowner, Pulgoda water frontage, extremely valuable land. But he said, yeah, my father and I, we enjoyed this land and we'd like to see it that way for generations to come. And I am hopeful that this becomes a start of part of that social shift that we were talking about, that people who have the means start thinking of conservation as well. Saying we share the land with other species, why don't we make way for part of that in our journey, all right? For the statisticians, policymakers, international parties and all of that, and government, we align a lot of our work with the different frameworks, the Montreal Global Biodiversity Frameworks, or the NBCs in Sri Lanka, the Millennium Goals. So we track our work against those. But this is not our primary purpose. We are not here to tick the boxes. So we don't want the awards. We don't want the tick boxes. We are happy to contribute to the national direction. But our primary purpose is species conservation. And that is what matters most to us. So we live for the species. There's a new thought process and emerging body of work. And I know Professor Sandhun, Sewandi, and number of academia and the government, they've been looking at the OECMs and the thinking around bringing private sector lands into the equation is starting to emerge in Sri Lanka. And we are ready for that. I think we can add a lot of value. Hopefully they will see us as a partner who has a couple of years of head start and experience. And I think, if anything, accelerating this journey will be the answer. Because like I shared earlier, there is no chance of protecting our endemics if we want to run a state-driven strategy. Because the state is not present adequately in the places that the species live. The law is not on our side, right? The penalties for some of the violations and things are putrid. There is no deterrent. If we go, and we've been through a couple of long cases only to find a very nominal fine. Land laws, you have the middle income lands, which are wonderful blocks for the kind of species that we are protecting. But being an entity of like who we are, nobody thinks that we are worthy of owning those land blocks. So we are prohibited from actually protecting them. Squatting is a huge problem. We have a donor in the room who was willing to give us his land in Soragune, and we did a trip out there, and we found that we had squatters there. And now we are, how do we move this conversation forward? It's a huge battle, right? We have water theft, we have disruption, we have tree felling. Species is a funny game. We are not allowed to engage with the species. We can look at them, we can say we are protecting them, but try touching them, collecting them, or trying to do something which helps them reproduce or propagate the species, the plants, and somebody will say, no, not without our permission. But if I'm the landowner, I can destroy every single tree in that property. I can fill up every water hole, and I can destroy every living thing on that property. And nobody has a problem with that. So agriculture has a right to kill. Conservation doesn't have a right to protect. It's a huge problem. That is the law. And so this is something that we have to figure out. How do conservation partners like us be able to bring more goodness and conservation into the lands that we engage with? Species transportation, there are lots of rules when it comes to transporting species, and you have to have someone from the department, I believe, who is to be present in some of those cases. And we know the department is hugely understaffed, right? So imagine if every transportation requires a presence, the quality and the quantum of research and knowledge and work that can be done obviously is minuscule. So we continue to do research, but unfortunately we have to do joint research. We have to do it with somebody who has a research permit. I have a funny situation where we are funding the protection of a particular plant species in a different part of the country. And we have that very rare plant species in one of our properties, and I'm spending the last 6 months trying to convince those very same people to help us to protect the species on our property. Because it's not their priority at the moment. So we have to figure out, and what we are hoping is that WNPS will be considered worthy to be an organization who can do its own research. 125 years of conservation. Surely if academic institutions which are not geared for long-term conservation can be allowed to do research, wouldn't a conservation organization whose primary purpose is conservation be more passionate at research leading to conservation? So how do we bring the shift in some of this thinking so that we can be better partners? That's the work ahead. We have to convince the powers that can make those changes so that we can bring our land bank and our knowledge. Institutions have academics. We have number of academics who are working very closely with us. So how do we find and tap into our resource pool better as a country? These are the questions that our work starts bringing to the core. Here's a funny thing. My team convinces me and says, these are Asoka barbs. Right? When I heard of this, I said, okay, let's go. And I just took this little video. Now, this is not in the already established locations that the species is. And the best I could do was take this video. And I can watch the people bathing 100 meters away. I can watch the agriculture working on the other bank. And I know in 3 years, these species are going to be gone. And there's nothing I can do about it, except take some pictures. And maybe talk to someone and say, can you do something here? We'd like to do something. So these are the challenges, but if you want challenges, I can give you plenty. Challenges are really in abundance, right? First, the video on the left, this old lady, we started doing our work in the hills and suddenly kept coming back after a few days of work and found all the plants gone. And it took us a few days to figure out that they start gathering everything which grows for their cattle fodder. And so then you can see we had to start using these protective enclosures in partnership with the estates, and that they'll allow. Everything else had to go. So this is how we have to start trying to create some kind of growth there. Take the middle, that's a young monk. You know how land encroachment happens, you can waltz up to some location and quietly clear a little bit, come back in 2 weeks and clear a bit more, maybe put a heart, 2 months later do something, and if you do that for 3-4 months after that, you're quietly entrenched. And in this case, they wanted to cross the water, put a dam across the water and take it out for a bathing area. On the third one, on the right, that's our first property, Minuangalla. The very person who sold it has a hydro project, and one of our most active waterways during the drought recently. They extended a slight dam which had been built up there and started taking all the water to put it back upstream into the hydro project. We have battles, and if you think that is it, we have more, right? We fought and begged and raised enough money and pocketed out and raised 16 million to buy 16 acres in Budungwela to protect some of that corridor that you saw just adjoining the one we had from gem mining and things like that. And mysteriously, a few months later, the entire top ridge of our land burnt. Deutsche has come now to help us reforest that, but our camera traps were all destroyed there, thrown about pieces, right? We've just started putting fire passages to prevent potential forest fires in some of the estates. I can tell you it's tiring work. If you think managing one estate is a problem, we have 30 problems into so many things. But if you don't have the stomach for this, we can't go this journey. So we're going this journey. It's going to be tough. There's not going to be easy days. There are going to be more heartaches than not. When you look at stakeholders, that's probably the most critical thing. But how do we manage stakeholders? Every location has a community, has the police, has the government, has private sector, has individuals, and we have 30 into that number. We did some early engagement in our row project, and we went very deep. We supported the school, did a lot of things. But you can't do that kind of engagement on scale. So we are yet to find out how our light engagement model with community will work. We don't know. This is work in progress. But we know we need to engage community to protect the multiple locations we work in. We don't have all the answers. We'll have to learn along the way. So somebody asked me, now, does this work? Right? So we had all the research from the individual locations which said they'd had great success. We had our own, Professor Lakdas is here, very instrumental in the row project. We saw the species coming back after a while. We've done the rapid biodiversity assessments, and we see that the species have absolute value in the locations. We can see that these are animal corridors, but we yet don't know what will happen when we do the restoration corridors. We've seen overseas examples. We know connectivity affects species differently, but what will happen? We don't know. But we need to approach this with passion and perseverance. This is not something that we can wait for 10 years to find out the answer to take the next step. So we are taking a leap of faith. Some statistics above, I really admire World Land Trust. They've funded and supported about 6 million plus acres, and they put millions of dollars worldwide. But what I like is that last number, 13,000 plus species is what they help protect. And right now, if you've worked with anyone who does our biodiversity surveys, 2 nights, 3 days, small teams. If you actually work for a longer period, you'll probably find that those locations have 20, 30%, 40% more species. So currently we protect more than 10% of the species count that World Land Trust does. for a fraction of the cost. That's what keeps me inspired with what we do. So can plants survive? People ask me this question quite often. So what's the resourcing model? How are you going to resource this? You heard our resourcing model, 3 people plus a lot of goodwill. We are gradually trying to improve that. We hope there'll be donors who will support us over a longer term so that we can beef up the resourcing model, skill up the resourcing model, strengthen that. But in the medium term, it's still going to be a goodwill-based, volunteer-based resourcing plan. And people have asked, what happens beyond you guys? I don't know about you, but I'm a big believer in the people of this country, not the politicians, the people. And I think when the time comes, there will be younger, smarter people who will come and say, Uncle, now move aside, right? Your job is done. Thank you very much. We'll take it from here. And I think they will do a damn better job than we will. So I'm an optimist that young people will embrace this and take these on and take it into the future. I don't lose sleep about the resourcing model. WNPS has gone on for years with volunteers, and I think plant will continue. The funding model, we had to crack a bit harder, because if we want to expand to the scale that we are dreaming, that needs funding. Again, I think there's a lot of goodwill in the room, in the country, with corporates, with individuals. We're seeing more and more people willing to support this when the awareness increases. And I think there are many people in this room who can help us make a bigger difference. So again, I don't have funding for more than maybe 1.5 years of work. But I have a belief that the people will come along. But the biggest strength comes from the role of WNPS. We are on the shoulders of a giant. Plant can never stand on its own. We can run this plan because WNPS is there and will be there. And I think that confidence is what drives us to be able to dream of something that is going to be around long after we are gone. But our idea here is not to build legacies. Our idea is to protect species, 1 tree, 1 acre, 1 plant at a time. And that's the way we want to go about it. I took this slide off an NGO. I'm keeping back their name for a particular reason. But essentially, when you look at the time and impact, we've done that first phase of trying out this idea and looking at where we go. Now it's a question of how will we scale for impact. If we are to do this, it can't be plant. Plant has to lose itself. And the notion of conserving in private sector lands has to be taken over by the people of Sri Lanka, who say that we are conserving on our lands because that is what we do as Sri Lankans. We share our land rather than something that an initiative like Plant is doing. And I think the more that we can create that awareness, we don't need Plant. We need people who believe that they are going to play a part in conservation. So today we have many people, many hands, locally, overseas, well-wishers, supporters, boards, resources. I can't even start to name them, but I can only tell you that it makes light work. But we need a lot of help, right? We need more donors. We need more partners. And any of you who can help on that front with land or otherwise is doing us a huge favor. We want people who are more engaged. Some people come and say, I'd like to help you. They'll come for one meeting and they're gone, right? We want more engaged volunteers. We want referrals and influencers. When Sonali Dirnyagala funded part of one of our land acquisitions, we asked her to give a small quote so that we could actually use it. Recently, I saw that Rohan had done a nice review on the low risk, and within that, he was kind enough to say that it is, he was referring to Plant, and he's saying it is without doubt the most ambitious and important conservation initiative that has seen fruition in my lifetime. He's nicely put us on a pedestal. Thank you, Rohan, but he's put a huge amount of pressure, saying, for God's sake, make this work. But this is an ambitious play, right? And it is only if all the strength of WNPS coupled with the different well-wishers around us can come together, can we make this journey successful. There are things on policy that we'd like to influence. We will keep tapping. Plantation companies, there are 1 or 2 plantation companies who have extremely valuable land corridors that we could use. Not a lot of land, but land corridors. And I've been begging the leadership of those companies and anyone I meet to say, please release these strips of land to us. So far, no luck. I will still keep using every opportunity I can if I find someone who knows leadership in those 2 plantation companies to say, please give us those 2 corridors. Because it makes a huge difference when you connect up big spaces with little corridors. So what's next? Where do we go from here? More of the same, right? We need to plant more. We need to get more funding. We need to do our reforestation work. So we need to buckle down. Nurseries, I spoke to you, we need to raise funds. We're talking recently about trying to do a species roadmap for plants and trees and look at which ones are critically endangered and things like that so that we can bring more science into reintroducing different species as well. So that's a body of work which might take some time and a lot of insight, but we are tapping into some experts to try to look at that. I'm very excited to share that we've reached some level of alignment with Hatton plantations. And I'm very hopeful that we can work through that in the next few weeks. Possibly they are listening online. And if so, we will probably build about 10 kilometers of forest corridor with them along Mahaveli and Kalani. So that is very, very exciting for us. But of course, I'll come after some of you for donations to kind of fund that. But very exciting work. Because it's these long strips of corridors which are really fantastic to work with. We want to do more research. We're passionate about doing more species propagation. Some restrictions on what we can and cannot do, but we'd really like to do more work. So we want more volunteers. We are piloting 1 or 2 big community engaged land models in this coming year. We are told that the funding has been approved on a big project, so fingers crossed. Number of people are talking with us around building the financial models which tap into financing with the ecosystem related services and the other things that can come in. That's a model which number of people are figuring out how to crack, especially in smaller land parcel locations in our countries. It's kind of made more progress in larger countries which have big land masses, but places like Sri Lanka with small land masses, distributed ownership, and multiple stakeholders, because the government also wants credit for some of the biodiversity credits and frameworks and various things. The plantation companies are there, the donors are there. So it's complex, but we're trying to work our way through some of these to see what we certainly can do with more influencers like the people in this room to talk about this, encourage more people to support us, and if so, we can go a long journey. So to close up, I just wanted to bring one book up which my daughter was encouraging me to read. Phenomenal book, An Immense World. If some of you would like to take some time to read it, it deals with how the different species work their way through this world, and it's mind-blowing because they talk at the frequencies that we don't hear. They smell the things we don't smell, and they navigate the world through that. And this book goes into all the things that we really don't understand about this magical world of nature. And aren't we really going to preserve that for our kids? Because mankind has still to understand so much of this wonderful world. And if we are to do that, we need to protect what is ours as Sri Lankans, which is our endemics. And that is in our control. Don't leave it to the state. Do something, stop talking, put your money where your mouth is, put your effort where your mouth is, contribute in some form, but please, please do something. Because what we do in this decade will probably determine the future of the endemics in our country. So with that, I want to thank you for a patient listening. I'm going to take questions with this group of people because they are really the ones who know more about this topic than I do. Right? So I have two great profs and my three-piece field team with wonderful experience between them, and collectively we'll take your questions and let me open up the floor for questions. Thank you. So I need some help with the mics. Hopefully I haven't put everyone to sleep. Okay, so first question, no questions. Oh my God. This is going to be a tough one, Rohan.
No, not at all. Thank you so much, Sriyan, for a brilliant presentation of what you guys are doing. So proud of you.
Thank you.
I just wondered why you didn't point out to the audience that the WNPS is the only institution in this country which is empowered by a specific act of parliament to do what you're doing. You have a legislative framework which you've been sitting on for some decades, and finally you're making it happen. But can't you use that to leverage authority from government, the act of parliament by which you're incorporated, to get the kind of permits you need to do the restoration work and the species conservation work that you're trying to do?
So that's something, thank you, Rohan, for pointing that out. Yes. So that is something that we want to explore and see very much, because unlike most recent NGOs and not-for-profit organizations, WNPS was created in '68, if I recall, by an act of parliament, which specifically gives us the right to have private sanctuaries. So we are doing private sanctuaries, but the question comes around the research and the research permits and things like that, which brings the work we do to life and helps us to be able to make a bigger impact. But certainly, yes, thank you, and that's something we would want to tap hard on that door to see. We are not competitors to DWC or Forest Department. We are complementing their work and we want to support their work. So, more questions, comments? Sunila has a question.
Testing.
Just taking off on what Rohan Mithyagara said on, the act that gives you more, I think, leverage than a lot of other organizations. Is it possible for you to look at features of landscape, like say a stream where you pointed out where Asoka Bab is? Is there a way of you isolating, say, something like a stream as an ecological feature rather than entire plots?
So, unfortunately, we can't control the landscapes we play in, because unlike, let's say, government, we can't evict people or take over land or do something like that. So wherever there is some sensitive land, we have to either buy it or convince the landowners to kind of set aside part of that. So that's what we are doing with many of the waterways in the plantations. They've given us, multiple kilometers of waterways. So when we find locations like this, the best we can do is bring it to the notice of a government authority to do something about it. But we don't have the right legal framework to actually engage in any of those. And all the reservations are state land as well, right? So it's complex, Sunila, unfortunately, but we'd like to. If anyone can help us navigate these complexities, we definitely want help. We'd like to take on challenges if people would like to kind of help us engage in lands like this, for sure. Question there. Okay, one there, one here. Krishna.
Okay. Thanks, Sriyan, first of all, for the presentation. And it's very encouraging to see such a large group of interested people here. I hope it will give a boost to the whole initiative. One question on fundraising and a particular channel for fundraising that we discussed some time back. I take my personal example, returning from Berlin this early morning by Qatar Airways. And Qatar has a habit of indicating my eco footprint, the damage that I did by flying from Berlin back to Colombo. Now, the idea we discussed some time back is whether this could not be connected to anyone who flies by providing them with an opportunity to compensate for the footprint that they have made. Has there been any kind of progress? Have you worked with travel agencies to tell them that those who buy tickets can compensate their eco footprint by making a donation to plant?
Thank you. So I think it's a great idea. We've been only having very early stage engagements with one or two parties who've been looking at how to model this. So we are trying to get more help on the modeling part so that we can almost have a very easy process of doing the calculation and, you know, giving someone the answer, almost like a put in your miles and you'll get the answer kind of structure. So I think if we can get to that level, sooner we can do that, then we'd possibly be able to put something maybe on our website saying, hey, here's a little calculator for you to use and, you know, contribute X based on what you do. So early stages still, but the idea is certainly something we are trying to figure out. It has to come from someone with some credentials so that we can, you know, if somebody queries as to why it's 100 and not 1,000, we need them to be able to defend their model. So that's kind of where we are. There's a question from here.
Is there an online resource that we can access for an area-based list of plants, species in Sri Lanka, that if someone was trying this on their own land, what they should remove, what they should encourage, what they should leave?
Okay, so a former colleague of ours, Ishan, recently kind of was suggesting to us saying, you know, see if you can actually put something like this together, almost like a do-it-yourself guide, which can be a easy use for individuals to say, hey, if I want to do this on my own, I don't want to ask anyone, can I at least get some ABCs? So that is something that we want to try to do this year, if we can raise a little bit of money to get someone to help with the knowledge gathering part. But yes, we'd like to get something out and put it up on a site soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sriyan, for your very passionate presentation. I know it's coming from the gut, you can feel it, but it's an uphill task. And I was wondering, we have WNPS, when I say we, has a lot of support from academics, individual academics who are engaged in research. I think you have to go a little bit further and get the institutions involved, make the linkages with the institutions. So the place to tackle, I think, is the University Grants Commission, and get some of the universities formally involved. And then once that happens, it is your research aspect of it, as well as when the funding from government or other sources, you will add, not that it is not respectable, but it will add more respectability. And two, so get, you have to have a champion for this, and you are the champion, you can see that.
No.
But get, I think, academic institutions more involved.
Yeah.
And then the other academics will come, and then they know they want to write papers, presentations for their promotions, all these things will be linked up. But also the funding will come also through that. Thank you.
Absolutely, Prof. So I want one of the other champions, Sampath, to kind of give some comments in response to that, please, because I know we've been discussing this.
Yeah, I think we are working along that model to have respective universities and have MOUs with them so that we can kind of leverage the research and conservation activities of what we started here with the much more state and non-state institution involved. Yes, yeah, it is in the landscape. Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions? Sorry. Okay.
Just building on what Lakdas just said, actually, I fully agree with that recommendation and think I was going to say the same thing myself, but just to elaborate, I think it will open up opportunities for international partnerships, which will open up more potential for grants and funding. And in relation to that, is there an opportunity now with the new government of Sri Lanka to, which I believe is looking at school curricula and school, in the context of school reforms, to perhaps have some conversations there around climate change or the work of WNPS, somehow incorporating that, that then also feeds into a pipeline of students who may wish to then follow climate-related courses at universities, and which will hopefully grow and expand as a sector.
Thanks, Alan. Yes, definitely. I think so. I happened to sit on one of the expert panels on curriculum development in the last government, which just finished, because it was education. And I think there was a lot of focus in that set of recommendations which recently came out to incorporate climate and all of that into curriculum. And I have no reason to think that any new government should think differently. We haven't still really understood the dynamics within the new government well enough yet. We are engaging, but I think it's still an early period to understand. But I think there is no reason to doubt the embracing of curriculum and climate and all of that. But at the same time, we should understand that that's no guarantee that the practice happens on ground. We are seeing so much of time lag between these incorporations. One of my old roles was in technology, and that was one of my big frustrations, because technology was changing at a certain pace, but the curriculums were lagging by more than a decade. So the practice and the timelines can be different, but absolutely. So I think WNPS is engaging on multiple fronts. We're doing a lot on education. So fingers crossed. Sampath, you can add.
On that, in row side, I think you were there as well. So yes, as Shreyan said, that yes, the curriculum and these establishments in terms of paperwork would follow, while already Plant has produced several undergraduate thesis projects, many courses like field work on restoration ecology, to techniques, field techniques like camera trapping, wildlife conflict mitigation. So it's already producing platforms for like field laboratory setup for universities across Sri Lanka, in Sabaragamuwa, Colombo, Open University, and so on. Graduate students started to benefit with this infrastructure, because it's relatively loose in terms of you going into a government protected area. There's lots of restrictions, and most these government protected areas are linked with tourism, which kind of basically undermine the value of research and the engagement of researchers in those areas, because those were competing with tourism and money-making objectives, where Plant doesn't have that aspect at all. And it's more rooted in the local communities with local ownership, because the landowners are around as well. So it is already creating those spaces for education, research, and hopefully development, along the conservation aspect, yes.
And Inoka, you might want to add, because I know you do a lot of education at our plant site there.
Yeah, adding to what Sampath said, for example, take the Budungala site and also Sampath site at Sabaragamu University. We are facing challenges with finances, especially to take students out. On the other hand, one of the reasons why regional universities were established, like my university, Sabaragamu, to cater for the regional requirements, the conservation issues, livelihood development. So this site or these sites are actually catering to those needs for kids to go there, understand their own landscape. It's almost like the living lab concept, where you can work and you can give back to the community. You can provide information to develop that site, which is happening at those sites right now. My own students from KTU and various other places coming there, independent research. Also working with the community, because there are lots of other issues like human-animal conflict and things. So it's changing the environment, at the same time it's helping to change the community, change their perceptions. So empowerment, yeah.
Thank you, Inoka. There's some questions on that side, I think. Okay, one here, one there. Okay. This one here. And let's get, oh, sorry. Sorry, if you don't mind, I'll take that question first. Yeah. No?
Question right at the other end of the scale, where we were just going with the last conversation, absolutely at the grassroots level, because we came in at the point where you were making a really serious point about the need for nurseries. And I wanted to ask what is happening with your field team in the communities with people, helping to support them propagate native species, because it's not a simple thing to do, you know, and people who in the community who want to engage can very easily become quite disheartened if they don't succeed in that propagation. How are you able to support people long term with getting their nurseries, no matter how small, to flourish?
So right now we have 2 sets of proposals which have gone to some donors, which is requesting for funding to support female-led, all-female nurseries, right? And we've done the business model on that, and we think beyond the second year, the model becomes self-sustaining, and we've funded, the idea is to fund the initial 2 years with the seed funding and guarantee the plant purchase beyond that. And we looked at the kind of financial returns that they could be earning, which is actually pretty decent because we can almost guarantee the buy. So fingers crossed, one's international, one's local, and if over the coming weeks and months there are donors who can help us also do more of that. But the thinking is to actually give some seed funding for the infrastructure, some advice, and some hand holding for about a 3-year period when we do it. And it has to be community-led, absolutely. So both Madhusankar and Sashini, those 2 young people have been leading in terms of finding new nurseries. They are the ones who sussed out the 6 privately owned nurseries that we work with. And so we are finding new nurseries who'd never done this kind of planting, and we've been encouraging them to start. So the response has been interesting so far, but the scale is not enough. So yeah. Madhushankar, Sashini, anyone want to add anything? Field guys, shy. They are the heroes of this whole thing. Right. So, okay, and one mic there. Okay, so I'll take these 2 last questions, one here, one there.
Just a suggestion for the funding for the master's projects and the PhD projects, because some of the newer universities don't have alumni, but as far as Colombo is concerned, and even Jayadunapura, the slightly older universities who have generated professionals and academics and who are now retired, some working abroad have sort of a guilt complex that they don't live in Sri Lanka anymore and don't support. But through the alumni, if through the UGC, if those projects are actually linked up with some of those people, you will find that individuals are quite often willing to support. And I say this with experience because I have linked up such people who pay out sometimes, 200,000 rupees a month, which goes a long way towards sustaining those students' projects, leading to masters, which will indirectly benefit what you do.
Super. Thank you. Thank you for that. Question there.
Not so much a question as a comment. Now, social work historically has been about helping poor people and buildings and health and stuff like that. But more recently, it has developed a branch called green social work, which is about, I don't know, you've heard about it? Okay, so it's about saying to social work students, it's not just people, we need to really find a way to conserve the environment as well and work at that field. Now, social workers have the skills to do community work, but in Sri Lanka, it hasn't really been used much to do anything with the environment. Very few projects have been used, but maybe it's something for WNPS to think about how to develop a kind of a lecture that will be interesting to, well, I have worked with both the NISD and Peradeniya, more with NISD students, to see whether any of them will be interested when they do their community work projects, which is like a 4-month project, that they can work with the community to do something. Now, especially when you talked about the seed project, because a lot of those people could benefit by having a bit of an extra income, but other ways as well, but that may be, and they work with estates as well, some of them, so that may be something to consider.
Great. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the suggestion. And certainly, yes, community being a big part of the philosophy of what we want to do, I think leveraging that social knowledge and those kind of groups would probably be something we should figure out how to engage. I mean, we are, like I said, we are open to engage, we are open to learn, because we really don't know what we are doing, right? Because this is a new journey for the country, for us. Private sector participation and engagement in conservation in Sri Lanka is relatively untested on these scales. So we can learn together from multiple people, and that's our hope, that's our dream, that 20, 30 years down the line, the country will see a vibrant set of private stakeholders who are safeguarding conservation in Sri Lanka. So on that note, let me thank you once again. Again, I'm honored to have, houseful audience and lots of great people who've been very passionately supporting us, and look forward to engaging everyone. And again, thanks to the plant team, field team, as well as all the stakeholders and the WNPS team. This is essentially a WNPS journey. Plant is just one of the many verticals we do, as you know, and we are really proud of where we brought it. So as we end at the final, once we're done with the formalities, we'll just run that little video once more while everybody's leaving the room. But with that, thank you very much.